I've lost my page. There's my other page. Me other corner. Where's me other corner?
You are being videoed.
Have mercy.
She's got to get a photograph.
People in. There's
Rolling
about 500 people coming in the door.
Jeff's got to get a photograph.
There's
Well, by all means. My favorite is.
I'm gonna take this picture. I'll bring it right back. I was just punching up on my printer.
Good.
Um,
I still have another one to compare me to.
Yeah, I don't know if I need a kid, man, but one of my favorite places. I have that. You? Yeah. Yeah, Robert. He is the vice president of development. Okay. Be careful.
I did meet him before.
Yeah,
I did.
We've been together all our lives.
Sorry.
Now, my wife retired from the library back in 17. I grew up near
hey there. How are you? Yeah, we do. We do. Thank you.
family, you know, even as long as the extended family is handy. I mean, Uncle had a machine shop. There's a third dozen, 7 machine shop somewhere. But this guy was handy. I'm just wondering if there would be a Richard and I back in the early days.
All right. Yeah, if you get those off my printer. Thank you.
Pure. That's right. They got it tuned.
You're on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bill's like a Mexican jumping bean.
I've lost.
Is it all right?
Lost my
This
hanky.
is a good thing
I
tonight.
lost my hanky. My handkerchief. I lost it.
Uh-oh.
I don't know
Where
where
did it go?
I don't
All right.
know. I suppose I dropped it.
This is me.
That's you.
Right.
Rennie, we ready to go live? Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight for this presentation. This one of our monthly presentations here at the Scottish Heritage Center. And I see, based on the audience tonight, as well as my guest tonight, that you either all love Murdoch Morrison, which is hard not to do, or you are great Civil War buffs as well. Or maybe you just saw this in the media or on the social media in some way and thought this would be something interesting to do tonight. So I'm glad that you're all with us tonight. And just a couple of small notes before we get started. If anybody would like to be on a mailing list to receive information about future programs that we're doing here, we'll have a little sign-up sheet if you'd like to share an email or something like that with us. I am trying to promote primarily through social media, through Facebook, and then a lot of you that I don't know found out about it through that medium. So that's been a good thing there. I'll continue to do that. All the programs that we're doing have been recorded. There's a whole series, a whole channel within the St. Andrews NC YouTube channel. You can go back and see many, in fact, most of the programs that we have done over the past couple of years. Next month's program will be the last one that we do for this academic year. We take a little break over the late spring and summer and resume in the fall. And our date for next month's presentation is going to be Tuesday night, April 29th. And I am just about firmed up completely with our guest speaker, who's going to be Bruce Dawes from the just recently retired from the Fayetteville Local History and Transportation Museum up in Fayetteville. That's going to be talking about transportation routes and particularly the trade and travel between Fayetteville and Wilmington. So that'll be a great presentation to be part of as well. So I invite you back for that. We do all of these at 7 p.m. in the evening on those dates. A couple of items of news. Prior to that next presentation, we're going to have a very special presentation from members of the Cape Fear Scottish Immigration Memorial Fund from Wilmington, who are going to be here. They're going to be presenting a special plaque to us in appreciation of the work that the Scottish Heritage Center does in providing resources for those interested in Scottish American heritage in this region. So certainly do invite you to be here for that special event. And some good news from that organization today. I just looked in my email about 10 minutes ago. They finally have gotten approval from the state of North Carolina to place a memorial cairn monument down at Brunswick Town, the initial site of the disembarkation of the earliest Scots settlers here. That was a very uphill battle. They've been working on that for about 6 years, and that came through today. And so they're very excited about that. And so we'll certainly celebrate that with them in our April meeting. So we got a lot of ground to cover tonight, and I'd like to introduce you to our guest speaker, Mr. Murdoch Morrison, who some of you already know. Some of you may have been here for his presentation last year on the Morrison Gunworks, and his wife, Melody, who is here tonight as well with us, going to be doing a little dramatic presentation for us a bit later. And so tonight, here we are. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to everybody that's online viewing this as well. It's amazing the online view that we've had coming really from throughout the world for these programs. A number from the British Isles, particularly from Scotland, that have been interested in a lot of the topics that have viewed them. So this is being shared far and wide, but really glad that you all are here, particularly tonight for this special presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Murdoch Morrison and I have been collaborating for some time on this, but very intensely over the past month or so, wanting to do something that would commemorate the 160th anniversary of Sherman's march through Scotland County. And it's a very intriguing story. There's a lot of source material out there, a lot of things that sort of dispel some rumors or confirm some rumors, depending on what you hear tonight. Murdoch has just done a tremendous job in preparing our PowerPoint presentation tonight, and we're going to be sharing the duties here in covering the many routes that were taken through the county back in March of 1865 by the various wings of General Sherman's army. So without further ado, we're going to get started. We're going to try to keep moving as best we can. We got a lot of ground to cover, just like Sherman's men did back in March. Thank goodness it's not raining outside like it was then. Just got a lot of pollen. So Murdoch, if you'd like to get started and take us over there, and we'll hit the light.
Well, I'm gonna start the same way I did last time, and that's raise your hand if you're my cousin. Yeah, there we go. Got some hands going up somewhere along in here, because if you grew up in Scotland County, as I did, I was born in Scotland County and grew up in Scotland County. We're all related somewhere. We're back there. You know, you might not want to admit it, but you probably are. All right, I'm going to start a little bit of background. You know where you are. That's what Sherman left in Columbia in February the 16th of 1865. And for about 3.5 years, I did a lot of work for the state of South Carolina, about 30 years ago now. And there's a lot of interest in what went on. There's still a lot of leftover, let's say, angst about what went on in February of 1865, but that's not the subject of tonight. I just wanted to set the background. This is where we were at that point. To expand on that a little bit, that was the view of the State House, the current State House, matter of fact. It still has on the walls some impact of cannonballs today. Street looking up Main Street from the State House, I assume that most of you probably have been to downtown Columbia, and you know they've really turned it into a beautiful spot again. The building on your left was the Confederate printing where they printed money. That was the printing house. The thing on the right here, the Ursuline Convent. Well, I just learned something. The Ursuline Convent boarding school. In the research for this thing tonight, learned something I did not know. The Ursuline Convent was in Charleston, and it was a mission effort from the Ursuline Convent in Cork, Ireland. And they had established another convent, a boarding school for girls in Charleston, and ultimately, I think because of the negativity they had encountered in Charleston, they moved it to Columbia. And unfortunately, it got caught in this conflagration. So that's what happened to it. Even though Sherman promised the Mother Superior that would not happen to it, it did. In the research for this particular program, I have it in my computer now, but I discovered and downloaded a 34-page handwritten book by a 17-year-old student from this convent on this occasion when this happened. It will rip your heart out. She is so eloquent and so articulate at getting across the story. Now, the reason I'm saying that story, if you have stories come down through the family in terms of things that have happened to relatives during that period, write them down. And I will make this offer. If you write them down and send them to me, I will try to compile them into something. And that's going to lead. Just remember that. Keep that in the back of your head. And we're going to go to the next one. Yes, sir. That's Charleston. Same time. Yes, sir.
Okay. So we've got Columbia. We've got Charleston. We've also got in early February, we got the fall of Fort Fisher.
Yeah.
It is said that one could hear the bombardment of Fort Fisher here in Laurinburg. And you got to imagine that. The assault on Fort Fisher was the largest amphibious operation taken on by U.S. forces prior to D-Day. So think about that. Tons and tons of ammunition hurled out into Fort Fisher, answered as well on this side. You can only imagine the bombardment for the hours and days that took. Being said that you could hear it all the way here in Laurinburg. At the same time, that part of February, we've had another event which has ties to Sherman's March. How many of you know where Alma is? A lot of people here know where Alma is, all right? You know the McNair plantation that was located there, the Argyle plantation, okay? There are a lot of differing dates that are given on this, but sometime between the 27th of February and the 3rd of March, just prior to the entry of Sherman's army, there was a group of, what can we say, guerrillas, if you will. They were combined, evidently, of an escaped naval officer from the Florence Confederate prison, some other escaped prisoners, and also some Native Americans. It's recorded as the first real raid by what we now know as the Great Gang of Henry Berry Lowry. All right. The local home guard here was mobilized, including those of us that go to the Presbyterian Church in Laurinburg. We have a window in our church commemorating Reverend John Coble, who was the chaplain for the home guard at this point, and questioned the father and the brother of Henry Berry Lowry, who were executed. Starting into a real time of terror here in this region. You've got that going on slightly to your east. We've got Charleston's fallen. We've got Sherman's marching wherever. We don't really know yet Fort Fisher's fallen. You got the bandits here that have been empowered by the coming of Sherman's army. A lot of uncertainty and a real lot of fear going on here in this community at this point at the end of February.
All right, now the reason I put this slide up is at February 1st, he's in Columbia, right? The troop strength of Sherman's army, all the wings, was a little over 60,000. March 1st, they're 57,676. Now, part of the reason for that is that he begins to peel off these additional people that have latched onto the army. And it grew as high as almost 80,000 people. He can't feed and care for 80,000 people on the march. He can't do 60,000 people really easily. So you see it dropping to 57,600. Now he's making it leaner as he comes up from Savannah through right here. Overall view, and I did this so that I would have, there's Milledgeville, come down to Savannah, coming up through Columbia, and ultimately his destination, his interim destination is Fayetteville and beyond. The lines on that represent the lines of march. The green line on the left is the cavalry, the Union cavalry under General Kilpatrick. He's staying on that side. Why? Because you still got portions of the Confederate Army under Johnston to the left of that, and he's trying to protect that cavalry is to protect the other lines. Then you've got below that, we're going to get into this in just a minute. You've got a yellow line, a blue line, and then a black line, and somewhere in there there's a red one. So this is interesting. I've got 4 or 5 of these. I just chose this one. This is the actual field map from Sherman's march. This was done by headquarters. So what you're going to see is, all right, let's take a quick look at this. Right here is Brightsville. That's just north of Cheraw, right? People know where that is. There is the PD River right here on the lower left corner. There's Cheraw. The little dots are encampments. And what that tells me down here on the left is we've got the red and the black. And we're going to get into that in a minute because he's going to get into that. And up here, and this is about a day's march later, they're at Mark Station. Does anybody in the room know where Mark Station was?
They can't hear in the back.
Anybody know where Mark Station was? Actually, Laurel Hill. That's right. It was station number 103 on the Wilmington to Rutherford Railroad, Wilmington to Charlotte Railroad. Laurel Hill was station 1, was mile marker 101. Marks was 103. And I just learned that in the research for this. I did not realize. I knew Marks Creek up there and Marks Creek Church and all that. But that's where that was. And that's where they bivouacked. So they had, at that point, at Marks Station, they tore up some track. And they had three of the corps, 3 of Sherman's corps right there. Overnight, moving on up. We're now at, we're March 7 and 8 is what he's got on here, dated. Moving on up, we got the blue and the green, I think. Okay, so this is moving on up toward the Lumber River, and this is where they split and go across. On this map, an inch is about 6 miles. So these two crossings are about 6 miles apart. Part of this thing tonight is to get us to the point, and it helped me a lot because we talk about Sherman coming through. So how did he get 60,000 soldiers across here? And look at how many, what do you got? You got water every time you turn around. Every mile or two, you've got a body of water you've got to cross. How do you get that done? Well, he split this up into to left and right wing, and corps within that. So each corps had about 12,000, 13,000 troops. The cavalry had another 20,000, 15 to 20,000 in it. But they all have got to get across. Plus all the supply train behind them, the wagons, the ambulance wagons, the fording, the equipment for fording creeks. That's stretched out. It could run 25 miles. And how quickly can you move 25-mile column of that, people who are walking, marching, plus everything else. And at this point, that's what the weather looked like when they're doing this. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, can we get back to that map for just a moment? The previous one. Murdoch and I have been puzzling over this map, and you can think that for a field-drawn map, for somebody that did not necessarily know the country intimately, it's pretty darn well done. But when you look at a few things, all right, here we're looking at what would have been the McFarland's Bridge area and a Love's Bridge as well. The next bridge down would have been Gilchrist's. Down here, I think, was McEachin's and McEachern's Bridge before you get down here to Campbell's Bridge, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But look at the middle of this. You've got the Laurel Hill Post Office, which at that point would have been in the community where the Laurel Hill Church is now.
The old Laurel Hill Church.
The old Laurel Hill Church, yeah. Where at me, that ought to be up this way a little bit. Would I be correct, those of you that are around? Yeah, it should be up that way a little bit. When we look at the way Gum Swamp flows right here, Gum Swamp sort of really flows more from northwest to southeast as opposed to more of a north and south type route that you've got here. And you got the Stewartsville Post Office about where it would have been, we know, and Barnes Bridge being down about where it is. But it's sort of interesting to note today sites that we know and see how either close or how far off this map really was. So,
yeah. That's one image I could find that really does express. The Sherman has written a great deal about the conditions of. It was pretty accurate for a good bit of it. Is they're waiting through deep waters, and this was his quote. The road has become so bad that other divisions will be obliged to camp within about 3 miles of here. The entire road has to be corduroyed. You know what that is? You're laying logs over the road together and trying to make it passable. There's water on each side of the Lumber River Bridge, and it'll be necessary to bridge it in the morning should the river rise much tonight, meaning that they're going to have to put down a pontoon bridge, which they'd like to not do, but they can. Because every line of march has its own pontoon bridge corps riding with it at the back. And we're going to talk about that later. Go.
all right. That's the pictures of the
That's
pontoon.
an example of pontoon work.
Yeah, so you see that's pretty wide area there. All right, and this is the marker that would cover what would have been roughly the route of the 15th Corps.
Yeah.
The 15th Corps. Right. The 15th and the one that Murdoch is going to talk about, the 14th and 15th came up the old wire road that came up to roughly the area around what we would think as present day Laurel Hill, but certainly was not present day Laurel Hill at that time, which had been the village located around the church. But you'll see this area camped in this vicinity March 8th through 9th. Now, there's a lot of references that you find in the primary sources about where they camped. And a lot of people are saying within their accounts that they're camping around Springfield. All right. Now, we're going to have a story about Springfield, something that happened there a little bit later. But when you think about Springfield today, as you're going down Highway 79, and this is just my own supposition about this, if those roads, which are somewhat are close to the same paths that they would have been 160 years ago, think about where you'd camp an army around Springfield. You've got a water source crossing Highway 79 there, so that's an attractive thing.
Gum Swamp Creek.
Gumsalt Creek, yeah, another little branch of it there coming across, which feeds our swamp here. Our lake here at St. Andrews. It gets to be a swamp occasionally. But nonetheless, you've got that bit behind the little convenience store, which is high ground. And to me, that, if I was a military leader, I'd say, all right, I want to camp on the high ground, because you look at the other side, the sort of the southeast side of Highway 79 over there, it's all low lying and swampy. You got a little bit of a ridge that leads up from behind Springfield and the road back there toward Laurel Hill, toward the old Ida Mill and things like that. So one might suppose that is the Springfield that they're referring to, but we don't really know. Don't really know. All right. And then so we move on.
Yeah. Okay. How many of you know what that is? I should get more hands than that.
I'll move you into the camera.
Think Rockingham.
Yes, Rockingham.
All right. This was a mill. This mill was not standing during the Civil War. There was another site. This mill was built in the early 1870s. It was in running until about 1920, and it was quite an operation, quite a building. And it underwent a massive fire in 1972. It had been empty really for 50 years. So anyway, I just want to put that everywhere that the Army came through, there are places like this. You can't see it as well as this now because it's overgrown. But their whole point was, how do we destroy the economic capacity of the area? How do we put such a dent in it that they cannot recover militarily? That was the whole point. His point was that you shorten the war and you shorten lives by doing that kind of destruction. Arguable point, but that was his point.
All right, here's the man that everybody loves to hate. And he made his way through Scotland County with the 15th Corps. That's one of the corps that Murdoch is going to be covering here. But here's our man. He makes his headquarters with the 15th Corps. So it's going to be sort of on the west side, on the west wing of the Army, probably someplace there from Springfield and Laurel Hill in that area, running that line of march there. And as you see, per the note here, the maximum width of the columns, we're looking at about 40 miles. So if you look at roughly that little mill that on the site of the picture that you just saw, which is actually used in an early Hootie and the Blowfish video as a little footnote, that mill was about the furthest west thing that there's really an account of the Army, it's Sherman's Army destroying. All right. So go from there and then go down a few miles east of us here. Let's say roughly about where Highway 83 would be, going to Maxton and south to Clio, maybe that area. You're sort of looking at an area that sort of is encompassed within that. And then you look at the foragers, the bummers. All right. And the orders were changed a little bit at the North Carolina state line, but these men have foragers. There are 50 men plus one officer that are given from each division to go out to forage. And they're told that they can range within 5 miles of the column on each side. So we've got all of these people that are, you look at the interior of the West and the East, they're all sort of running together. So you can probably imagine that there was a lot more going on perhaps a little bit further to the east or west. And we'll talk about one of those foraging accounts a bit later.
And to add to that, the number of foragers per day averaged about 3,000 men on horseback foraging 5 miles wide on either side of the individual columns every day. That's how you feed a 60,000 man army. You steal from everything you can. I
had to include this one because Scottish Connection here at the Scottish Heritage Center. And so probably the first man that crossed the state line from South Carolina into North Carolina was Sherman's head scout for his whole Army of Tennessee, Captain William Duncan. All right, William Duncan came from just outside of Edinburgh, Scotland. And many years ago, how many of you, did anyone here ever know Roy Parker, the late editor of the old Fayetteville Observer Times? All right. Roy was a great local and regional historian. And years ago, Roy pulled me aside and said, you know, the first man in Sherman's army was a Scot. And I'm like, really? Tell me all about this. And this guy is a pretty famous fella. He's actually the guy that delivered the message that was to go to Lincoln that he presented in the city of Savannah as a Christmas present. This man right here, a Scot. But here's what Roy Parker surmised to me. He said, all right, he's coming up from Trall. He knows he's entering into an area that's got a lot of Scottish people in it. All right. This guy puts on his Confederate uniform or civilian clothes, whatever. If anyone was to question him, he could have been somebody's cousin. So it was sort of serendipitous, maybe, that he was the first man to scout, probably the first man that crossed in maybe a day or so early before the rest of the army was here. We know he enters Barnes Bridge about March 5th, and he leads the unit that actually destroys the railroad infrastructure here in Laurinburg on the 6th of March. That's the unit coming out of the 14th Corps. Coming up again from Springfield. They're dispatched from Springfield to destroy the depot and the railroad yard at Laurinburg. The depot was destroyed. The railroad yard was rebuilt the year after the war, 1866, as the railroad began to progress and fill in that little gap that existed from Old Hundred to Hamlet and further west on that Wilmington, Charlotte, and Rutherford Railroad. So there's a man, a Scot. There's our Scottish connection for tonight.
Okay, remember we talked about the cavalry. They're trying to protect the left side of all these lines from any attack by the Confederates. General Kilpatrick, lots of stories about